So in this video, I am going to talk all about my podcast. So yes, I run a podcast. The podcast's name is The Streetwire Show. It recently crossed 150 subscribers. So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for supporting us from the very beginning. We started like 2 months ago and we are at 150 subscribers now. It's not that fast moving subscriber count, but that's okay. I really mean that 150 people are watching my podcast, and the Streetwire should, I don't think it would be able to make this far if you all were not in the tremendous support with us. And some people ask me, why a podcast, why not something else, why not some funny things or some wines or something like that. So I am going to address all those questions in this video. So there will be 5 questions I will be addressing in this video. And the first question is, why to start a podcast in the first place? So I started this podcast in order to learn. Basically, I wanted to learn from the best of the people who are doing great in their field and are tremendously successful, which they are doing this for like 20 years, 15 years, or for at least a decade. Like we talked about education, to many edtech educators, to someone who is teaching, having a PhD, teaching in a coaching institution for the last 20 years. So I think they are the master of their field, and to basically learn from them. And I think, and I recently tweeted about it too, that podcasts are better than books in some cases. So books are good. I read a lot of books, but podcast is, to be honest, an interactive session. And if you get to host a podcast, it's really a good feeling to meet some new people. And the second thing, what are the perks we face while running a podcast? So there are many perks. At least even with 150 subscriber, I got to meet people and network with good people. You know, people I met in my college, and the professors are very good. Many professors are very good in my college, especially my friends are very good. So I think they ask me a lot about podcasts and how to meet people, network people, how I invite guests. So that is a great feeling. And basically, I started my podcast to network with new people. I have been inviting my personal contacts in the podcast recently, and you can also check out the podcast link in the bio. And it's a great feeling, to be honest, to network with good people, and also to create in-depth, good related questions. And like what I mean by creating good questions, that means the question that are right to be asked. So you have to ask smart questions to become smart, and in order to ask smart question, you have to ask dumb questions. So basically, in the initial level of podcast, I was asking a lot of dumb questions from the guest itself, and I was not doing a lot of research. But now I do intensive research and at least make a podcast that is 1.5 and 2 hours long. So there's that. And I think many people relate to me and my questions, which are like, maybe some questions are dumb enough, some questions are smart enough. But we in our podcast starts from a very basic. We presume that the end consumer, that is you, the viewer, doesn't know anything. And if you watch our podcast, you will, I think, be the master of that field, or at least aware of the recent happenings of that field in the very recent times. And I highly recommend to check out our podcast. It's one of the great podcasts. So running a podcast is a tough business, and I also wanted to run a podcast because it creates a huge dedicated audience like you yourself. So we got 150 subscribers. So 150 people always watch our video at least. So our like average podcast count, viewership count is like 700 to 800 people always watch one of my episodes. You can also listen to our podcast on Spotify. So basically, I am thinking that 500 people or 600 people, it's not seems to be a very large number. But imagine if 600 people is sitting on one place, and you are told to go on the stage and to speak something. So that's a great thing, and it will make you shiver, and it will make you, to be honest, nervous. And initially I was getting nervous with guests and everything, like what should I ask and should I not cross the line. But now at this podcast, we have recently crossed our episode 5, and I just get to be myself. So creating a huge dedicated audience that relates to me is also I think one of the priorities of running this podcast. And also to do in-depth conversations, like you can have a conversation with somebody with 15 minutes or 20 minutes, but it will not really answer all of your questions, or at least not give you a right new perspective. But I get a lot of shit from my friends also that don't create 1.5 hour podcast or 2 hour long podcast. So for you, we have specially curated the Streetwire clips. So you can also subscribe the Streetwire clips. We do intensive research and cut the clips of the podcast itself with the full context and everything which are important enough and upload them in clips, and the clips are not more than 10 minutes long or 6 minutes long or 8 minutes long. So you can also subscribe to the Streetwire clips, and if you are in a hurry and wanting to watch a video of 7 minutes to 8 minutes and not go as high as 1.5 hour or 2 hours long, you can also watch our clips. And to be honest, long videos are a necessary evil because you cannot expect in-depth conversation and make it fast at the same time. So basically what I am trying to say is, to answer all the questions you have to also ask a lot of dumb questions, and dumb questions takes time. The answering of those questions takes time, and in order to have some smart questions and all those answers, you have to ask a lot of questions, and it really makes the video long. So I highly recommend that you watch the entire video. And podcast all over the world like Joe Rogan's podcast and Lex Fridman podcast are very long podcast, and people are watching like crazy, and I see that. So the dedication of people who wanted to learn is very high, and I think I wanted to curate my podcast according to those kind of people. And again, thanks for watching our podcast. Huge love for like 150 audience which are watching our podcast right now. See you on the other video.